Throughout this video series, we've learned secrets in each of the key joy areas of energy, livelihood, the relay paradigm, and the window of opportunity. But ultimately, joy is a choice that can only flourish when we understand that each of us is important and significant, and that we have the chance to make a genuine difference in the lives of others. You know, there's a wonderful story about a teacher named Halise Bridges that powerfully demonstrates how this thread of hope weaves its magic throughout our lives. You know what? We're gonna let Brian tell us the story because nobody tells it quite the way Brian does. But I can tell you, Halise was enlightened and her purpose was ignited with a truly enabling question. She focused her vision for these young people when she asked herself, how can I help every student know that who they are makes a difference? Let's hear Brian tell us all about it.
Who I am makes a difference. Well, that comes from a teacher whose name was Halise Bridges. And Halise Bridges, though she taught high school English, she understood something real important. She understood, though, she didn't really teach English first and foremost. She taught people, called kids. And the medium she used was English to get them inspired, get them to know their creativity. And she was a fine teacher, and she asked a wonderful question one year. She asked, how can I help each and every one of these kids know that who they are makes a difference? How can I help them see that each of them has unique and special qualities, that like a snowflake, they are absolutely unique in this world with something special about them? And when you ask a great question, you often get a great answer. And she thought of ribbons. And she thought, I know, I'm going to create a special award ceremony. And on the last day of school, one by one, I'll have each student, I'll put up a little stage in the front of the room. And one by one, I'll have each of my students come forward. I'll pin this ribbon on them, and I'll say something about them that identifies for them and everyone else something special, unique, and wonderful about each student. Well, there's a magic in this because once she decided she was going to give those ribbons at the end of the year, guess what she was looking for all through the year? She was looking for those qualities that would be able to be identified on that special award ceremony. And we'll learn that what we focus on is what we create. And so this ceremony was the biggest thing in the high school. Kids clamored to get in her class because it was such a big deal. And it was wonderful, and the kids just felt wonderful every year that it would happen. But then she asked another great question. She said, well, what would happen if we went a little further? And she got another idea. And so at the end of the school year, she had her normal ceremony. She gave all the kids the ribbons, but then she asked their permission. She said, you know, we've been doing this ceremony for years just this way. You get your ribbon, and that's that. But this year, with your permission, I'd like to try something. She said, what I'd like to do is this year, I'd like you all to take your ribbons and wear your ribbon for one day. And through that day and beyond, I want you to know that what I say about you is ever present. It is eternal. But what I want you to do with your ribbon is wear it for one day and then go to somebody in your life who's made a difference for you. Give them the ribbon, pin it on them, and have your own unofficial award ceremony. Tell them what it is that makes them special, what it is that makes a difference, and let them share that ribbon, feel the joy of that ribbon. Ask them to wear the ribbon for one day, but keep that thought that you said about them forever, and then pass it on, and on, and on, and on. And she said, maybe one of these ribbons will start today in this classroom, go all the way around the world, and someday come back to you. Would you like to try it? And the kids thought, cool, yeah, we'll do it. Well, one young man in that class, 16-year-old high school English student, wore his ribbon for a day and asked himself, well, who am I going to give the ribbon to? And he knew, just as you may know what to do with your ribbon. And when school was over, he went to an office building that had a high-tech company. And he went to a young executive in that company who he had met at a career day. But this guy had come to this career day and not just kind of sat there behind a table for 3 hours and went home. When he saw that this young man had a real interest in this area, he kind of took him under his wing. He really spent time with him. He almost became like a big brother. He brought him into the office. He showed him the technology. He introduced him to people. He even took him to a New York Knicks game. That was like a dream come true for this young man. So this young man has his ribbon. He walks in the office. He goes to this young executive. He says, sir, I'd like to give you this ribbon because I want you to know that who you are makes a difference. I know how busy you are, and yet you've taken all this time just to spend with me. And I just wanted you to know how much it means to me. So I'd like you to wear this ribbon because who you are makes a difference. Would you wear it? Well, imagine if somebody walked into your office or your home today and gave you a ribbon like that. And the guy said, sure. He was beaming. He felt great. And then the young boy remembered. He says, oh, by the way, you get to wear the ribbon for one day. What I say about you and my gratitude is forever. But at the end of one day, you're to take the ribbon, give it to somebody who's made a difference for you, tell them why they've made a difference, and ask them to pass it on and on and on. The guy goes, gotcha, sounds great. So all that day, the young executive wore his ribbon. He was feeling good. He was beaming, feeling bright. Went home. He was a single man. And the next day, he drove to work and he asked himself, who am I going to give the ribbon to? And boom, he knew. So he drives to work, parks his car, goes in the office, goes straight to the CEO's office, who is his ultimate boss. Now, let me describe the CEO. He was not what you would call the warm and cuddly type. He was tough. He was gruff. In fact, the emotion that he seemed to bring out in most people was one of fear. And this young executive had only really spent time with him in meetings. This guy kept to himself. He was admired because of what he had built over the years, but he was basically feared. So this young exec goes to the guy's office, knocks on his door, says, sir, can I have a word with you? The guy's sitting behind his desk, kind of curious, says, all right, come on in, grab a seat. And a young guy says to him, he says, you know, yesterday I had the most wonderful thing happen. This young man that I met at a career day came in and gave me this ribbon. Says, who I am makes a difference, this blue ribbon. And told me that I'd really made a difference. He's a great kid. In fact, someday I hope he'll come back and work with us. But then he threw me a curveball and he told me I get to only keep the ribbon for one day and I need to give the ribbon to somebody who's made a difference for me. And I thought about it, sir, and I realized the person that I want to give the ribbon to is you. Well, this gruff CEO has his arms crossed and now he's wondering what this is all about. And the young exec goes on, he says, you know, I don't know you that well, sir. In fact, the only time we've really spent together has been in meetings. But I know this. I love what I'm doing here. I love my future. I love what you've created, and you're the one who made it happen. You are a creative genius. Through you, I have a future that I know shines. So in a very rich and lasting way, who you are has made a difference. So I was wondering, sir, would you wear this ribbon? Well, this rough, gruff, tough dude with his arms crossed, when he heard this whole story, he could hardly believe it. He uncrosses his arms. He looks at the young executive, completely disarmed, and he asks, do you mean it? And the guy says, I really do, sir. You've made a difference. He goes, sure, I'll wear the ribbon. So he pinned the ribbon on. And as the young exec is walking out smiling, he says, oh, by the way, you get to wear your ribbon for one day, and then you need to pass it on and on and on and on. The guy goes, great. Well, all day long, the buzz in the office is, what's with the boss? Because he's out talking to people. He's kind of smiling, he's beaming, he's visiting with people, kind of sticking his chest out going, how you doing? See my ribbon? How's it going? People are going, wow, we must have really good profits or something. I've never seen him like this. He had a great day. In fact, it was an awakening day because he had forgotten, once they've gotten big, he'd forgotten what it was like when he started the company. He'd forgotten how bright his people were. He'd forgotten how dedicated they were, how much fun it was there. And he had a great day. And then he's driving home that night, and the words from that young exec struck him, and he realized he was supposed to give his ribbon to somebody who's made a difference for him. And as soon as he thought of it, he knew. So he drives home, he parks his car in the garage, he walks straight into his house, goes straight to his 14-year-old son's bedroom. Doors closed, music blasting, knocks on the door to finally the boy hears. Boy opens the door, father looks at his son, and he says, son, can I have a word with you? And immediately his 14-year-old son looks at him with concern and says, what's wrong, Dad? His dad says, nothing's wrong, son. Can I just talk to you? See, his son wasn't used to seeing him like this. So he walks into the bedroom, sits down, the music gets turned down, turned off. He sits down right beside him on the bed and looks at his son. He says, son, you never believe what happened today. This morning, this young executive came in and he gave me this ribbon. It says, who I am makes a difference. And he told me that I was a creative genius. You know, I've been around a long time, but I don't think anybody's ever said something like that to me. And he said that I needed to keep the ribbon for one day, and then I needed to give it to somebody who's made a difference for me. I had a great day, son. I've forgotten how great people are. But then when he told me I had to give it to somebody else, I asked myself, who would I give the ribbon to? And son, it took me about a millisecond to know that the person I wanted to give the ribbon to is you. You see, son, along with your mom, you are the reason that I get up in the morning every day. And all I ever do is tell you what's wrong with you. Why don't you get a haircut? Why do you wear those pants 17 sizes too big? Why don't you work harder in school? But son, when I had a chance to give you this ribbon, I realized how much I love you and how proud I am of you just as you are. Son, would you wear the ribbon? Well, the boy started to cry. And I don't mean he cried a little bit. I mean, he sobbed hysterically. And his dad was not ready for this. He thought the boy would feel good. He didn't really know what to do, but thank goodness something inside of his spirit said, just be present. Don't try to stop him. Don't try to fix it. Just stay with him. And so that father stayed beside his boy, put his arm around him, rocked with him, let the boy cry it out. That boy cried for 5, 7, 10 minutes. And finally, he'd cried it all out. And finally, his father could look at him and ask him the question that had been troubling him ever since he handed the boy the ribbon. And he looked at his boy's tear-stained eyes and he said, "Son, I don't understand. I thought the ribbon would make you feel great. Why are you crying, son?" And the boy looked up at his father and he spoke quietly but with strength. And he said, "Daddy, I was crying because tomorrow I was going to kill myself. Because, Daddy, I didn't think anybody cared about me. Most of all, I didn't think you did. I was crying, Daddy, because I'm not going to kill myself. I'll wear your ribbon. I'll be here tomorrow and the next day and the next day." That's a true story. And that boy's still here. And the first part of this story that I want to make real, see, because when we hear, we forget. When we see, we're more likely to remember. But when we do, we understand. And the first thing I want you to do is think about your ribbon and wear your ribbon for one day, because who you are does make a difference. It makes a difference to people you never even dreamt made such a difference. But then pass it on if your heart says to. Pass it on to somebody and have them. Maybe this thing will go around the world and get back to you someday. But I also want you to know that this is a story that brings alive many of the things that we've touched on through this entire CD set. First, that father that day came home with a fresh energy. He was filled with possibility. Instead of going to the bar or to the couch, as soon as he got home, he wanted to be with his son. He was a world-class buddy thanker. He was alive with recognition, acknowledgement, and appreciation for his son. Maybe most important, he was fully present with his son. Instead of trying to be in his world, he stepped into his son's world and allowed his son to open up to him as he had never done before. But that father that day brought one more principle alive, and it's one that will make a huge difference for your family. It will make a difference in any team that you lead. People will run through a wall for you, and it will open their ability and their desire and the determination to go for things, to take some good risks. See, that father that day, for the first time in years and years and years, became what I call a true blame buster. Blame. The single most destructive word in the language of teams is the word B-L-A-M-E, blame. I want you to picture the word blame in a circle, big letters in the middle of a circle. Then imagine you're taking a bright, big, flat red pen and just slash it from diagonally across that word blame and become what I call a true blame buster. Blame. Think about it. Does blame ever serve you? You know, some of you going, well, sometimes it can give you a kind of a moment of relief. But ultimately, what is blame? Blame is nothing more than an excuse. It's giving up the most precious gift we've been given, called personal responsibility. And it's not to say that bad things don't happen. It's not to say we don't mess up, because we all do mess up. But blame busters realize that blame serves no purpose for a very simple, practical reason. Think about blame in the context of time. Is blame about the past, the present, or the future? That's right. Blame is always, always, always about the past. Now, can you do anything about the past? No, it's over, it's done. But as long as you stay stuck in the emotion of blame, where are you? You're in the past. See, blame busters don't pretend things don't happen, but when things happen, they say, okay, what did we learn? What are we going to do now? Now, blame busting is an incredible opportunity to heal and create fresh relationship and to build everyone around you. And my last story about blame is one that's about the person. How many of you have somebody in your life, you're pretty certain God put them on the planet to bug you? Don't point at them over there. Well, the person that God put on the planet to test me is my dad. And when I was a little boy, my dad was my hero. He was big and strong and solemn, and more than anything in this world, I wanted one thing. I wanted my big, strong daddy to put his arms around me, to give me a hug, to look me in the eye and say, son, I love you. You're a great kid. But my dad could not do that. You see, my dad's mom passed away when he was 7 years old. And my uncle said that from that day, some part of him closed up and he just couldn't let those kinds of feelings out. So when I was a little boy, I just wanted him to love me. I wanted him to say, son, I love you. You're a great kid. Put his arms around and hug me. But he couldn't do it. By the time I was 7 or 8 years old, I wanted it even more, but it was getting harder for him. He was a cop in LA. He lived a tough life. By the time I was 11 or 12 years old, it started to transform, and I started to think, not even consciously, but subconsciously, maybe if I'm great at something, maybe if I do great in sports or I do great in school, maybe then my big, strong daddy will tell me he loves me and put his arms around me, tell me he's proud of me. But he couldn't do it. And so by the time I was 13 or 14, I began to get the feeling, to heck with them. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I got my friends. I got my life. I don't need him. But I was lying. He was still my hero. And more than anything ever, I wanted him to say, I love you, son. I'm proud of you. Put his arms around me, give me a hug. But he couldn't do it. By the time I was 17, I began to say, I hate him. I went away to college and I really had no relationship with my dad for the next 15 years. We didn't write postcards. We didn't write birthday cards. We didn't write Christmas cards. I would go stay with my friends instead of staying with them. If I called up on the phone and my dad answered the phone, we'd have the exact same conversation. He'd say, I'll get your mother. That was it. And you know, over those years, I thought I ran the gamut of emotions. Sometimes it was like, I don't care. I don't need him. I got a life. I'm doing it. Things are great. And I was lying. He was still my hero, and it never went away. And finally, on my daughter's first birthday, see, my dad had nothing to do with my family. He had never seen his only grandchild, and he wasn't that far away. And on her first birthday party, man, get out of town. That is one of the greatest days of a human's life, is your first child's first birthday. I mean, they got these bald heads, these pointed hats. They're putting cake all over their face, and it's like, whoa, you just relive that incredible first year of their life, and you realize, I get it, birthday. And it was an incredible day. But when I put my little Kelsey to sleep that night, I found myself with the deepest pain inside my heart. I started to cry. I started to hurt inside, and it was because of my dad. And I realized it wasn't going away. And for the first time in my life, that night, I actually became a blame buster for the person who maybe made the biggest difference in my life. And I decided to do something about this blame and to get rid of it. And I decided what I would do was write my dad a letter. Now, I had never written him a letter, and I did not know what I would say. But I made up my mind, one thing I would do is I would not try to impress him. See, that's what I had only done when I was a kid. I thought, well, maybe if I'm good at something. But this time I said, I'm going to let my heart be free. I'm going to come from my heart, and whatever comes out is meant to come out. So I set to work to write that letter. And in about 3 minutes of writing that letter, I got hit with an unbelievable realization. You know what it was? I realized how much I loved my dad. And I realized how much he taught me. You see, my dad was the guy who taught me about energy. My dad worked 2 jobs for 16 years. He was a policeman at night, and in the daytime, he would work construction. On weekends, you'd think he'd rest? No way. He'd get up 6 o'clock in the morning. He'd fix everything. My dad taught me about energy, and I thanked him for it. And then my dad was the guy who taught me to be true to my own word. He had the courage to say what he felt, even if it wasn't popular. And I thanked him for that. And then I started, after writing all these things, I wrote to my dad something I never thought I would write him. I said, Dad, you are missing it. Today was Kelsey's first birthday, your only grandchild, and you don't even know her. And Dad, you're missing out on the chance to know my wife, Carol. She's the greatest person. She's your daughter, Dad. Dad, you're truly missing it. And I signed that letter, I love you, Brian. And I got to tell you, when I wrote those words, I realized for the first time that in all those years of blaming my dad, never once said I had told him how I felt. Put that letter in an envelope, stuck a stamp on it, stuck it in the mail, and I got to tell you, I felt good. I did not do it to get anything back, and to tell you the truth, I expected nothing back. I never gotten so much as a postcard. So 3.5 weeks later, when I went out to my mailbox and found a very thick letter, I got to tell you, I was nervous. It had an address, a return address that I knew of, and handwriting that I wasn't that familiar with. And I realized this is a letter from my dad. And I was petrified to open that letter. I thought to myself, he must really be ticked off. Because the only emotion I know my father had ever really shown me was either stoicism or anger. And I thought, he must be really angry. But I wanted to open the letter, and I kind of waffled back and forth, and finally, shaken, I opened that letter, pull it out. It's a 3-page letter from my father. And in that letter, my father changed my life. And the first sentence changed everything. He said, "Son, I don't think I'll ever be able to tell you how much it meant to me that you wrote that letter." He said, "Son, for as long as I can remember, I wanted to tell you how much I wish I could be more like you." I didn't think my dad even liked me, much less thought highly of me. He says, "Son, you're always so comfortable and at ease with people. It's always been hard for me." And then for the next 2 pages, my dad went on to write about all these things that had happened, all those years that we had been kind of separated, things that happened when I was in college, things that happened when I was a coach, things that happened in graduate school. He wrote to me about where he was when he heard about it, how he felt, and how proud he was of me. I didn't even think he even knew about it, much less cared. And my dad ended that letter with these words. He said, "Son, please forgive me. Please forgive me." He said, "Son, I realized from your letter what I've been missing. I want to know Carol with all my heart. And more than anything else, you've awakened me to the fact that I want to be a grandfather to Kelsey. Please forgive me." And he signed that letter, "Love, Pa." I got to tell you, my dad was quite a guy. Well, less than a few months later, my father came to Southern California where we were living, spent a full day just with me, a couple days with my wife and child. Today, one of my greatest joys in life is that my dad is my friend. He picks up my daughters and hugs them and gives them a kiss. The things that I always wanted, but he just couldn't do it with me. In fact, not that long ago, my dad and I had our first hugs. And I got to tell you, it was pretty memorable. Not in the way you'd think. We were so awkward at it that as we went to hug each other, we both moved our heads in the same place at the same time and we conked heads. But it still felt pretty darn good. See, nothing would have changed without blame busting. Blame allows you to get out of the past, to move to the present, to open up a bright new future. I wish you joy.